My name is Peter J. Redding. Welcome aboard to you professional coaches, those that want to become a professional coach, and for those of you that are interested in understanding what professional coaching is all about. This is episode 2, and we're talking about the ICF International Coaching Federation, ICF Competency Model. And the specific competency we're looking at today is competency number 3. And so if you missed the first 2 competencies, that's in episode number 1 that is recorded and available to you on YouTube as well as Facebook, as well as the Coach for Life website. And this is in a series of what I would hope to ultimately have is about 100 of these master coaching sessions looking and exploring coaching mastery. So welcome. Competency number 3, establishes and maintains agreements. Establishes and maintains agreement. So there are 11 sub-competencies in this one today that we're going to be talking about. If you have any questions as we get on this, by the way, please put those in the Facebook chat box that we're on right now. We're live. And I will get to those as we progress within the hour that we have together today. So here's the definition that the ICF talks about. Partners with the client and relevant stakeholders to create clear agreements about the coaching relationship, process, plans, and goals. Establishes agreements for the overall coaching engagement, which again, as we talked about last week, might be 6 to 12 months. This is a very typical coaching engagement for a coach to be working with a coach, a client to be working with a coach, as well as those for each coaching session. So there's an overall agreement that goes on ahead of time before, frankly, coaching actually begins between the stakeholder, who is a person that's paying for it, often the case in a corporate setting or an organizational setting where they are hiring a coach to work with one of their employees, one of their leaders, one of their high potentials, etc. This also covers, and you'll see today in the individual sub-competencies, there are a number of them that apply to the very specific ongoing, could be weekly, bi-weekly, coaching session between coach and client. So there's a master plan, master agreement, if you will. What are the overall goals that the stakeholder has in mind? What are the goals of the client that they wish to work on? And they could be personal and or organizational or professional, if you will. And then there's the ongoing coaching session that there's like a little mini contract for that half an hour, 45 minutes, hour coaching session that takes place. And that is determined ahead of time in terms of the frequency and the duration. So let's get into it. Number 1, sub-competency underneath establishing and maintains agreements is explains what coaching is and is not, and describes the process to the client and the relevant, again, stakeholders that are involved with this. I'm going to start with what coaching is not, because if you are not a professional coach and haven't studied these things, you may just agree to do, yep, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, I will report back anything that you want, which violates professional coaching as we practice it. And it's not, you want to be able to say that you're not going to be doing therapy, because we're not training you to be a therapist or to do therapeutic processes with somebody that is stuck in something that they need a different kind of helping professional that, again, coaching does not aspire to do or be able to provide. We are holding a space for the client to develop, and we're working with clients that are self-responsible. They're responsible for their decision on what they want to talk about, the direction that they want to move in, the depth that they want to move in, and the content that they want to cover and improve upon. So that's all part of this conversation up front with the sponsors that are wanting this person to get something, get better at something. We are also not trainers while we're coaching. We're not mentors. We're not trainers. We're not subject matter experts. There's a lot of misconception in the field, even amongst professional HR people and L&D people, learning and development people, that say, okay, so this guy needs to be a better communicator, so we're going to get him a coach. Well, probably a good idea to get him a coach, but maybe even a better idea to have him go to a training about better communication and better communication skills. So there needs to be this conversation in terms of what coaching includes, doesn't include, covers, is likely to support a particular individual. In the early days, and I'm saying early days here, the profession is only 25 years old as of last year. But if an individual is wanting to, again, learn something or be guided in some manner, then coaching may not be what they're looking for. It's also in the early days been used as a, not so much frankly, but there's still cases that I hear that this is the last chance of saving this person, this employee, this executive. So let's get him a coach and see if we can use the coaching process to bail him out and put him or her back on track. I don't think that's very successful, frankly, personally. It has been used for that, and it is successful in some cases. But the key to this is that it is mostly used for healthy people that want to move forward in their life, move forward in their career, move forward in their jobs, move forward in learning new things, and are excited about that process. And so if that's the case with the individual that you're looking for to get a coach to support them in that process, it is spectacular, it being coaching, because coaching is 100% customizable to that particular individual. It's in a confidential space, and it allows that individual to say things out loud that, frankly, they may have been afraid to say to themselves in their own shower. And so by expressing what's going on inside of them, they become more aware, more conscious, and when that takes place, they make better decisions. And so not so much for the person that needs corrective action, much more for the person that's healthy and self-responsible. Okay, so that's the explanation piece of it, and that just goes into a little bit depth of what we're talking about here. But again, as a professional coach, you're expected to be able to talk about it. Let's move on to number 2. Again, if you have any questions as we go on, just please type them into the chat box for me. I'll get to some of those during our session today, hopefully. And if not, I'll get to them afterwards and respond to each one of you. Okay. Competency, subcompetency number 2, reaches agreement what is and what is not appropriate in the relationship, what is and is not being offered, and the responsibilities of the client and relevant stakeholders. So this is a partnership. You're going to hear partnership a lot in these ICF competencies. And this is not a partnership in a sense of, okay, I have reached partnership status in my consulting firm, so now I have a say and a vote in terms of what we do around here, or what we invest into, etc. It's not that kind of a partnership. But I do very much have a responsibility in this partnership as the coach to support my client's agenda, I have a partnership in supporting them to look at things differently, perhaps. I have a partnership in this in terms of monitoring the time, because they lose track of time in our coaching sessions, and so on. So it's explaining that again up front, and it's explaining the responsibilities also of the client. The client is responsible, for example, to bring the agenda. It's your responsibility to bring the agenda every time that we get together for a coaching session. It may, and mostly is, aligned with what the corporate sponsor wants you to be talking about and developing, but it may not. Let me give you an example. Holistic coaching, which most professional coaches are aspiring to do, talks about what the client wants to accomplish from an accomplishment standpoint, a results standpoint, a performance standpoint. It's kind of like the what. What's the problem? What's the situation? What's the path? What's the journey, etc. And it's a big and, it's also developing the person as a human being. Who are you? Who do you want to be? Who do you need to be successful at blank? At being a powerful, inspirational leader, at being a more compassionate husband, a more compassionate brother, a more compassionate dad. So it's both and. So the responsibilities of the client is to drive the agenda. His agenda, her agenda, their agenda. The stakeholders, and this could be, again, the H&R, human resources person. It could be the L&D, learning and development person. It might be their direct boss that observes them on a daily or weekly basis. They also have responsibility during these 6 months or 12 months in terms of giving that person feedback on here are the 4 things that we're hoping for you to develop in the coaching relationship. And for that individual taking on a responsibility of providing feedback to that coachee, their direct report, what's happening. I noticed you in the meeting today, and I know communication skills was one of the key areas that we wanted you to focus on this year. And we've given you a coach to be able to do that and support you with that process, that journey. And I noticed that this time, wow, I was very impressed with how you listened to the individual that was having a different point of view than you did. And I want to acknowledge you for that. And again, it's not necessarily having to agree, but you were listening intently, and I think that individual felt heard during that meeting. So those are the kinds of things that, again, we need to set up ahead of time with that person, rather than the boss or the stakeholder, in this case, the H&R person, saying, okay, it's all over to you, coach. You're responsible now for them to be successful, and we're out of this. I've done my work, right? Not the case. There's a lot of coaching, I think, in the early days that was the case, that the HR just said, okay, great, I got one less problem. I got to go on to my other 99 things that I got to do today. Or the direct boss, in this case, not getting involved as intently as we're finding that if they do now, and keep focusing on that with their direct report, there is more value that comes out of the coaching journey. So that's what we're talking about here. Reaches agreement with who's doing what, who's responsible for what, and making sure that that's really clear up front. There are going to be some times where the person that's hiring you or bringing you in or vetting you to see if you are an appropriate person to work with some of their high potentials again, or their executive group or their management group, coaching is going lower and lower in the organization all the time. And they may, at the end of this conversation, this is not what we're looking for. We want somebody to teach this guy. We want corrective action and hold their feet to their fire, and we want you to, we're a little bit afraid to tell them what we need to tell them, but we want you to tell them. Not my job. Not as a coach. And as a result of that, the professional coaches will sometimes have to walk away from a potential job because what they are looking for is not what you deliver as a professional coach. And you have to have the gumption, the wherewithal to say, I appreciate what you're looking for, and that is not what I do as a professional coach. Yeah. And guide them to whatever that might be more appropriate for them. So let's move on to number 3 here. Reaches agreement about the guidelines and specific parameters of the coaching relationship, such as logistics, fees, scheduling, duration, termination, confidentiality, and inclusion of others. So there's a whole pot of things that have to come to agreement here. We've talked about some of these things, but we also talk about logistics. Is this going to be done in person? A lot of it, people have said, yeah, I want to have it in person. I've been doing virtual coaching for 25 years, and I still do. And I find that incredibly effective. So there are clients that I've been coaching now for 6, 7 years, and I think I've had an in-person coaching session with one of them one time. And we coach basically every 2 weeks, right? So one time out of the last 6 years, I've actually met with that client in person, face to face. Another person I've been coaching for 6 years, I've never coached that individual face to face. It's always been through either phone or Skype or WhatsApp or a video interchange and so on. So figure that out. With COVID, there's a lot more virtual face-to-face coaching that's taking place in the world. And my experience, for those that have questions about, well, is it more effective face-to-face and in person where you can see all the gestures and body language and all of that? For me, frankly, I think it's been more intimate, more safe when it's not in person, because the client they can cry, they can, do what they're doing without feeling like they're being watched. So in some cases, it's actually even more impactful for the coaching process to take place in that privacy of not seeing them, not seeing me. In other cases, I know that there are a lot of coaches and coach training that talks about body language a lot. The signals, the nuances of, the client just doing that. And they can observe that and say, okay, so I'm observing that you got a little tense there, or you were a little bit hesitant there. Now, you pick that up in language, of course, but you can also see and use those visual cues, and I encourage you to do that if you're comfortable with it and the client's comfortable with it. But those are the kinds of things you talk about here under 3. Logistics, fees, scheduling, duration. How often are we going to meet? We're going to meet once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month, 4 times a month for the next 6 months, whatever that might be. We're going to meet for half an hour for each session. We're going to do it for an hour, 1 hour each session. There's no parameters here from anybody that I know of in the professional coaching community that say you have to do it this way. When I first started coaching, I worked with mostly entrepreneurs. They had a lot on their plate. They were spinning plates, like 6 or 8 different things going on at any given time. And so I coached with my entrepreneurs for a half an hour each week, 4 times a month. Okay, so if the month had 5 Tuesdays in it, then we coached for 4 of those and we got the week off. And they love that. And it was a good repetition for them because they had so much going on. They had good follow up. They always had something new the next week. From there, I moved to coaching executives mostly, and they didn't have time every week to get together with me. So we coach for 45 minutes typically, maybe twice a month or 3 times a month. I'm now working with world-changing visionaries. That's been over probably the last 10 years now. And I work with them for 1 hour twice a month. And that is, so it depends on what you want to do as a coach. It's also the kind of client that you're working with that will dictate duration and number of times that you coach with them. Okay. Confidentiality is always a huge one. What goes on within the coaching session itself is private and confidential, period, up until the full extent of the laws of the land. And we talked about that last week. But it needs to be clear that what goes on within the coaching conversation typically does not go back to the sponsor. What does go back to the sponsor, I had a question on this during the week from the last session, episode number 1. What do you share with the sponsor? What can you share? And what I share is that I met with a client, your employee. We spent an hour on last Wednesday on the 15th of the month. And I report that back to them. That's it. That's it. I do not share their progress. I can invite them to talk with the coachee, their employee, to find out how they are assessing their own progress. Sometimes the coach will be asked to come into a conversation with the sponsor, the boss, the client, and myself. I will help facilitate that, but I do not divulge anything that the client shared with me. I don't say, he's going through a divorce right now. You don't know about that. That's not for me to share. It's just not. He's got some trepidations or things going on with this, that, or the other. Confidential. And it's one of the things that makes coaching so powerful because a client then feels safe to open up, safe to explore deeper, safe to get into their own vulnerabilities. Whereas if they know that might be divulged at some point in time to somebody in their organization or outside the two of us, maybe they don't share it. Maybe they hold on to that and it stays buried. Okay, let's move on here. Number 4, partners with the client and relevant stakeholders to establish the overall coaching plan and goal. Okay, so once all that stuff is talked about, then what is the goal? What are the goals for this particular engagement? Engagement we talk about is, again, that 6-month or 12-month engagement, the process of going into the coaching relationship. So coaching relationship might be 6 or 8 months or 12 months. The plan and the goals are the overall goals for at the end of this. Okay, so here we are in January. By December or by next January, when this relationship is terminated, okay, we're funding it for a year, and we may renew it at the end of that year. We may not. But at the end of the year, what do you want to see this individual be able to do, achieve, handle, learn, etc.? Okay. So that's the overall goal of the engagement. And that's what number 4 is all about. And to actually sit down again with the players, stakeholders, the boss, HR, L&D, client, and coach, and put it on a piece of paper. What are we going to be doing? What's the goal? What's the end goal? Okay. All right. Let me take a look at some of the questions here that I'm coming up here. What do you mean by guidelines? Let me read this this here. Oh, guidelines as opposed to parameters or logistics. Um, Guidelines are basically how the coaching process takes place. So there's a lot of learning and development people. There's a lot of human resources that actually do know what professional coaching is all about, and a lot of them have gone through our trainings, actually, my personal trainings, or other International Coaching Federation training. So they have a really deep understanding of what coaching is all about. But for a lot, there's probably more right now in the world overall that don't know. They've heard about coaching. They think they know what coaching is because they'll compare it to, yeah, that's kind of like mentoring, or that's kind of like something else. But they don't really know the overall guidelines of professional coaching. And so it's important for them to understand these competencies, frankly, and you might even just show that to them. In the contracting, when I get to that, I give them a copy of the ICF ethics, all 28 points. Okay, so that they want to choose to read through those and get an idea of those in terms of what coaching is all about and the ethical behavior of a coach in relationship to their particular employee that they want to get a coach for. That's what we're talking about. So it's a broad strokes. Yeah. Parameters and logistics. Logistics obviously is just how often are we going to meet? We're going to meet on every other Tuesday. We're going to meet for a half an hour or 45 minutes each time that we get together. We're going to have a review at the end of 6 months, and that review is going to be between coach and client initially, and then between coach and client and HR person. Okay, let's say that they're the sponsor, or with the boss, or with all the above. Okay, so all that is determined ahead of time, but it just makes sense. I mean, if you're going to set up an agreement or contract, then what's inside the contract? What am I doing? What am I agreeing to do? What are they expecting me to do as a professional coach, and so on? And what am I expecting from them as well? Okay. Got another question here before we move on. What do you do if the coachee decides to move away from this sponsored organization? Can the coach be held responsible for this? I like that. That's a good question, actually. Um, the, I've never heard an organization come after a coach and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we were trying to get this guy to be the next, CXO of something. Now he's moved off to the competitor or somebody else." It happens. It can happen. But that can happen with or without coaching, frankly. So I mean, people move. Have you noticed? They change organizations during their career a lot more now than they did 40 years ago. So that's, I think, part of the landscape of organizations. They understand that part. The coaching itself would stop, presumably, because the organization would stop paying for this individual to finish up the last 3 months of the coaching engagement. And again, the terms of cancellation or changes or stoppage of coaching is all going to be within that original agreement. Okay. We can, at the end of the year, we can both mutually choose to renew this for another year, or if it stops before the end of the year, then no fees will be due for services not rendered. I mean, so all of that's kind of like standard terminology for agreements, and organizations are accustomed to doing those kinds of things. There's a number of contracts, sample contracts are available through, just do a Google search and you'll get a bunch of them. The ICF has one on their website. We'll put a link to that down below when we post this to Facebook and to LinkedIn. I mean, not LinkedIn, YouTube. And part of this conversation, and it's so important for those kinds of questions, is that I, as a coach, am not responsible for this person getting from level, wherever level they are. Let's say they're level 2 in their eyes for a particular parameter, and we want them to be at level 8 by the end of the year. That sole responsibility rests on the shoulders of the coachee. I am not guaranteeing as a coach that they are going to get to level 8. I can shoot for that. I can support them if they are willing and able to do that. But it's their work to do. I'll keep saying that. I'll probably say that in another 100 episodes. It's the client's work to do in a professional coaching relationship. My work to do is to hold a safe space that's non-judgmental, non-guiding, non-authoritative in order for them to do the work that they're ready to do. Okay? And I say that quite directly to the sponsors, by the way, so that they understand I'm not a professor coming in. I'm not a trainer. I'm not the mentor. I'm not a subject matter expert on blank, on what they want that employee to get better at. Yeah. Good questions. Thank you for that. Let's see if we got one more and then we're going to move on. How do you handle a situation when the client mentions she wants to end his or her life? It's never happened to me, but it has happened within coaching. In the United States, we have an obligation to report that to an authority, typically the police or fire department in a lot of states, or a helpline. Again, things that are outlined up front in the agreement of what I do and when I can divulge confidentialities. So in the first episode, we talked about if the individual you have a sense that there is a threat to their own life, which is the point of this particular question, or property, or somebody else's property or life, then again, we have, USA, it changes from country to country, have an obligation to report that to an authority that can do something about it and can do an intervention. Okay, it's never happened to me. It's actually very, very rare that I've even heard of that. But I did have a student that said they had come into that. They called me, asked me, "Oh my God, what do I do with this one?" I said, "You have to report that. You have to report that." So that's the answer to that one. All right, let's move on. Competency number. We did 4. Good. Let's move on to 5. Subcompetency number 5, under establishes and maintains agreements. Partners with the client to determine client-coach compatibility. All right, so we've been talking about the logistics and what's going to happen and how often we're going to do it and all of that business. This one for me actually trumps, and if I were to reorder these, I'd probably do this one first, frankly. Is there a chemistry or not? And this, for me, it doesn't have to do with it doesn't have to do with I'm a good coach or I'm not a good coach. I know I'm a spectacular coach. I know that. Okay. I know a lot of the students, in fact, all of my students that go through the whole process of learning and certification with me are spectacular coaches. I mean, they're awesome. They're hugely compassionate human beings. They understand the guidelines and the competencies of being a great coach. They've demonstrated that time and time again in our training and our certification, down to the down to the one line of context or transcription. They're awesome. And they may not be the right coach for some clients. Is there a chemistry between that particular coach and that particular prospective client? And when the chemistry is there, then trust is there. A depth of searching and going deep within that client is available to both the client and the coach because of that sense of chemistry, that sense of compatibility, that sense of safety, or again, what I call the sacred space, creating that sacred space of doing that beautiful person's work in my presence. magic. If you don't have that chemistry, that compatibility, then you might get some value out of coaching. I still think there's probably value out of coaching, but it may be 20% of what's available if there's a compatibility. I've talked with lots and lots of people that have brought in coaches, assigned coaches. Okay, so coach one, you're going to work with CXO number one. Coach two, you're going to work with CXO number two, and so on. All right, so they've made assignments in the early days, much less so nowadays, frankly. But back 15 years ago, 18 years ago, I had one company executive share with me that 80% of the coaching didn't work. And I asked him, how did you do the matching? How did you do the who coaches whom? And she said, we assign them. And I said, well, that's probably the issue, because 20% chance you're going to get good compatibility, and 80% of the time you're probably not. It also takes away the opportunity for the client to make a choice. And coaching is all about the client makes the choice. And oh, by the way, the client makes the choice. So much more that has worked out much better is where the organization will select a panel of qualified coaches. They, again, are mostly looking for International Coaching Federation credentialed coaches, and a lot of those are at the PCC level. We'll get much more into that later on in the series. But they know that they come up to a level of professional coaching and has been certified, if you will, to know that, to do that. They've been tested, they've been heard. And out of that panel, then, for the people that they want to provide a coach to, the HR again, or learning and development people will say, okay, so here's the panel. You go through their resumes, it's online. You can have a conversation with 2 or 3 of them, have a short conversation to see if there is that compatibility. And when there is, then you can choose which one you want to work with. And we'll go through the contracting after that. Don't skip this step. Now, compatibility works 2 ways. While it's the client's agenda 100%, I'm going to say that again, the client's agenda is 100% on the client. As a coach, I don't get to choose what they talk about next Wednesday when we get together. The compatibility, however, has to work 100% for me as a coach, as well as 100% for the client. So while I might be able to coach this particular individual, I can choose and have the freedom to say no. And I may do that for a number of reasons. I don't want to get into the depth of that one right now, but the point that I want to make here is really important, that the compatibility has to work for both coach and client, compatibility-wise, chemistry-wise. All right? So don't, like we say, don't hire good should yourself as a coach to say, oh, I should be able to coach this person. I'm a trained professional. They need my support. They look like they're very coachable. But don't force yourself into a relationship that you don't feel comfortable in, and the compatibility is not there, the chemistry is not there. Frankly, it's not fair to the client. And so I can't emphasize that one again enough. Have it be compatible for both. Number 6, partners with the client to identify or reconfirm what they want to accomplish in the session. Okay, what they're referring to here in the session is this particular day's session. Now we've moved away from the broad scope of overall planning for the 6 months or a year. Now we're getting down to, okay, it's Tuesday here right now. I have a coaching session coming up, let's say at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The question that I ask to deal with this particular competency is, what do you want to accomplish in our session today, in the next hour, what do you want to walk away with? Okay, that's it. As opposed to, hello, how you doing? What's going on? Catch me up on life. That's a chat. That's a Starbucks chat. That is not coaching. They are there to accomplish something, and I need to know or want to know and reconfirm with the client that they and I are on the same track. Are we on the same track for today's session? It's also taking a broad and say, okay, so they want to come and they want to talk about, I want to accomplish world peace by the end of our session today in an hour. Okay, well, good for you. Hallelujah. I applaud that. Now, what aspect of that would you like to accomplish in our session today? What focal point? What specific? So this is also a sense of, yeah, okay, so this is generally where we're going. We're going basically west, okay, in terms of direction today. Okay, got it. Now, where in the west? What exactly do you want to accomplish or would like to accomplish or set out to accomplish in the next 55 minutes? Okay, so that's number 6 here. Okay, we got about 15 minutes left. Let me finish a couple more of these, and I'll come back to any questions and see what we can finish up with that and still be within our hour. Number 7, partners with the client to define what the client believes they need to address or perhaps resolve to achieve what they want to accomplish in the session. Now, again, we're talking about this session today, 3 o'clock this afternoon session for an hour. So the second thing that I want to do is, I approach this one a little bit differently. I'll give it to you straight, though, in terms of what the ICF is intending here. The ICF is saying sometimes there's stumbling blocks, sometimes there's blockages, sometimes there's hesitations, fears, concerns, etc., that have held them back from accomplishing this particular thing that they want to accomplish. And the point here, the important point is how or what you need to do, what you need to set aside in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish today. In other words, get rid of the blocks. Okay. Now, my personal approach and my philosophy is more from a positive standpoint as opposed to let's dig around in terms of what's blocking you. Is what could support you, and perhaps what's a strength that you have that could help you overcome this in order to accomplish what you just stated that you wanted to accomplish by the end of our session today. Okay, so I come at it from more of a positive standpoint of what can you do on the upside or positive side or strength side, strength-based approach as opposed to barrier way of looking at it. But in either case, find out if there's anything that they can do or to ensure that they can get through whatever they have to get through in order to reach their goal for today. Now, this may sound a little bit granular in terms of, minute or detailed, but I can tell you that the professional coaching arena has adopted this approach to the beginning of a professional coaching session, the individual coaching session, for probably the last 8 years or so. And by doing this for the last 25 years, I can tell you more stuff gets done at a deeper level by doing this, as opposed to just, okay, what do you want to chat about? What's going on? What's your agenda for today? By doing these last 6 and 7 pieces of these competencies, the client gets more clear about what is actually going on and what might be holding them back, or what they need to put in place to buck up and take on the challenge for the day to get to that accomplishment. And a couple more that we're going to be going right into right now. So huge. This is huge. I encourage you to actually go back and reread 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, every single coaching session, or put it into your notes ahead of time to remind yourself, if you're a new coach, to go through these particular, how do you maintain, again, going back to number 3, both establishes and maintains agreements. This is a way that I get to maintain the agreement, of being the coach. Good. Number 8, partners with the client to define or reconfirm measures of success for what the client wants to accomplish in the coaching agreement overall. Now, this we're talking about the whole year's worth of agreement or the individual session. Again, today's session at 3 o'clock when I'm going to get together with my client for an hour. So this would sound like, okay, so I hear that you want to accomplish A, B, C. So how will you know that? Again, open-ended question. Don't suggest, okay, so then obviously you need a plan. Okay, well I just took over the session as a coach. Thank you for that. I've just resigned from being a professional coach and took over as a leader. So don't do that. What measures of success? How will you know? What will you need to walk away with in order to know that you've accomplished ABC? Have them do the work. I want to have 3 action steps. Okay, great. I want to build up my confidence from the current level 2 to a level 8 to know that I can take this on and have this conversation. Okay, great, excellent. So it might be a solid, tangible, measurable, measure, and it might be a sense of a higher level feeling. I want to feel good about this. I want to feel like I'm contributing to my family. I want to feel like I'm contributing to this direct report that I have in terms of their growth. So that's what I want to. That's what I want to leave with. All right. Yeah. So measures of success is the way we say it. And even if you speak English, most clients, the first time they hear that, goes, "Huh? What does that mean?" So explain it. Measures of success. How will you know? What tangibles or intangibles will let you know that you've accomplished what you set out to do? Or if it's obvious, then just repeat it back to them. Am I understanding this correctly? That blah 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 blah, and the client go, "Yep, okay, got it." Let's moving on, as we are going to do right now to number 9, 10, and 11. Number 9 is partners with the client to manage the time and focus of the session. All right, so the focus is their agenda, their agenda, their agenda, all the time. They can change the agenda, and sometimes they do after they get into it a little bit. They go, you know what, the original agenda was to do this, but I think now that I'm getting a better realization on what's happening here, they're at a deeper level. They see things differently. Halfway through, they go, here's what I really want to focus on for the rest of the day today. Okay, super. And then abide by that. Support them with that. Managing the time is for young coaches is very difficult sometimes because they don't know how to interrupt. They don't know how to close the session. It's been designed to do it for an hour, and they come back sometimes in training. I was up until 3 o'clock this morning. I couldn't stop the client talking because no one's ever listened to them like that before. So we are the timekeepers. Period. Clients will lose track of time. And so this is a conscious effort on the coach's part to indicate that. We have an hour. I have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So maybe halfway through, I'm going to say, okay, so we've got about 35 minutes remaining. Do you want to go into this a little bit deeper, or is there a different direction or different aspect of this that perhaps you'd like to talk about? Your choice. And they'll say, no, we're doing good. Okay, great. Keep going. And then maybe at the 5-minute mark, I'm going to say, okay, so we have about 5 minutes remaining. How do you want to finish up? What would you need to be complete for today? And sometimes they need to put some things on the back burner, meaning we haven't gotten to points number 2 and 3, so perhaps we'll pick that up next week. That's a client talking, not me. So we're the timekeeper as a coach. We have to be because they lose track of time. They are so deep in their topic, they didn't realize that 50 minutes have just slipped by. Woo! Number 10, continues coaching in the direction of the client's desired outcome unless the client indicates otherwise. That's what we just talked about. They may get to a point within this. Okay, what's happening here? Hold on a second. All right. They may get to a point in the conversation where they want to go in a different direction. Their choice, not mine. So I'm going to keep going in a direction and a depth that they want to go to, and that's my way of partnering with them. And number 11, partners with the client to end the coaching session and the coaching relationship in a way that honors the experience. So we have a formal coaching closure at the end of 12 months or 6 months or 3 months, whatever the engagement has been. We have a very formal foundation session at the very beginning of the coaching relationship, and we have a formal closing session. And when I get to that, that'll be one of the 100 in the 100 series that we get to ultimately, and there'll be an outline for that, so stay tuned for that. Okay? All right. So I'm looking at my clock now. We've got about 4 minutes remaining according to my official clock. Let me see if I get to some of the more of these questions before we wrap it up for today. What do you do when the coachee decides? Oh, okay, we did that one. Got that one. Good day, I have a question. I came across the case when, let me just read it from my screen here, it'll be easier for me. Coach told the sponsors about a colleague that she was non-coachable and that resulted in firing her. The question is, how should a coach act when she believes that the client does not need coaching? First of all, it's a great question. Thank you for that. Second of all, I have an ethical obligation to stop coaching when coaching is no longer being effective. I, as the coach, have an ethical obligation to stop coaching or to do a significant check-in to see if the client is still getting something out of this. And I go back to my earlier saying that the coach and the client both have to be comfortable and compatible with the relationship. So the short answer to that is stop coaching them. And to do it in a respectful manner. This is not about, you're no good as a human being. I'm sorry, I started this thing. And in some cases, they said, yeah, coachable, or wants to be coachable. The answer to that is really revealing in terms of if there's a victim mentality, and what I mean by victim mentality is that I can't move forward because I didn't get the proper education, because I'm white, because I'm black, because I'm old, because I'm young, because I don't have experience, because I don't have a master's degree, because of the prejudice that my company has for people like me. Then they may not be coachable. There may be other deeper issues that they need to work through to become coachable. Coachable is, by definition, I'm going to hold them responsible for taking the actions and the steps that they commit to themselves. I don't assign homework. That's the client comes up with their action steps or inquiries, but I don't assign those things. And if they don't take self-responsibility for doing that, then again, I have the ethical obligation to terminate the relationship. Yeah. All right. Okay. I think that's about it for today. I'm seeing that we're right at the top of the hour. So thank you for your focus, your attention. Please come back for episode 3. Next time we are going to be talking about, let me see if I can get this up here. Next week's focus is going to be on competency number 4, cultivates trust and safety. And number 5, maintains presence. Don't miss it. Looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday. And we'll be back here. Have a great week. Stay safe. God bless and namaste.